Today and every day for the past 43 years, that legacy of courage has been insulted by a tyrant who uses brutal methods to enforce a bankrupt vision.
Nearly 40% of Cubans live in poverty, and many families survive on less than $2 a day. In 2023, food prices jumped by 120% while wages stayed the same. Streets that once echoed with laughter now carry the sounds of hunger and despair. With such shocking numbers, one must wonder, can Cuba ever return to its former glory? Before Fidel Castro's revolution in 1959, Cuba was one of the richest countries in Latin America. The country had strong trade ties with the United States and a booming tourism industry. Exports of sugar, tobacco, and coffee helped build a strong economy. Foreign investments led to modern roads, buildings, and a lively middle class. By 1958, Cuba's GDP per person was about $356, one of the highest in the region. The literacy rate was over 76%, and there were more doctors per person than in many parts of Europe. Havana was a busy city that welcomed over 350,000 American tourists every year. In 1956, more than 38,000 new cars were imported, making Cuba a leader in car ownership in Latin America. Yet even then, problems like corruption, social inequality, and political instability were present. Many rural Cubans lived in deep poverty, and the gap between the rich and the poor was wide. When Fidel Castro took over, he promised equality and a better life for everyone. Instead, Cuba changed dramatically. The government took over private businesses, and many foreign investors left the country. Soon after, the United States imposed a strict trade embargo that hurt Cuba's economy even more. For a while, Cuba managed to survive because the Soviet Union came to its aid. Between 1960 and 1990, the Soviet Union sent about $65 billion to Cuba, buying sugar at high prices and providing oil. This support made Cuba look stable, but it was built on a weak foundation. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Cuba lost its main source of help. The country then entered the special period, a time when food, fuel, and medicine became extremely scarce. People were forced to eat whatever they could find. Even stray animals were used as food. The economy shrank by almost 35% in a few years, and power cuts sometimes lasted up to 16 hours a day. Although the government tried small reforms, it kept a tight hold on everything, and the problems only grew worse. Today, Cuba's economic decline is worse than ever. Government policies have stopped growth, and corruption and poor management waste precious resources. Even though small steps have been taken to allow private businesses, the state still controls almost every important industry. This has created a broken system where money is wasted and new ideas are crushed. Cuba has come to depend on tourism, but that too has faltered. In 2023, only about 1.6 million tourists visited Cuba, compared to 4.5 million in 2018. The COVID-19 pandemic made things even worse, leaving hotels empty and local businesses struggling. Meanwhile, the Cuban peso has lost nearly all its value because of runaway inflation. By 2024, inflation went over 500%, making even basic food items almost impossible for most people to afford. The average monthly wage is around $20, which is nowhere near enough. For example, a pound of powdered milk now costs about $10 on the black market, and a carton of eggs can cost as much as $15. In this harsh economy, many Cubans don't have any desire, however, to depend on illegal markets simply to survive. The toll of Cuba's economic disaster is staggering. In just the past 2 years, over 1 million Cubans, more than 10% of the population, have left the country in search of a better life. In 2022 alone, nearly 300,000 Cubans arrived in the United States, marking the largest migration in the country's history. Desperate families risk dangerous journeys across shark-infested waters on flimsy rafts, hoping to escape deep poverty. Entire communities have been abandoned, with only the elderly and government loyalists left behind. Joblessness has reached catastrophic levels. Over 70% of state-run companies now show serious losses, and official unemployment figures don't capture the true extent of joblessness. Hospitals are missing vital medicines, Many doctors have left Cuba for jobs overseas, and regular power cuts have become the norm. Reports of human rights abuses are frequent, as the government harshly suppresses any form of protest. For most Cubans, everyday life is a battle. Imagine standing in long lines for hours just to buy a loaf of bread or a carton of milk. In cities, public transportation is unreliable, and the internet is slow and heavily controlled, making it hard for people to get news or share their thoughts. In rural areas, many still use old-fashioned horse-drawn carts because modern transport is out of reach. For many families, the only hope is money sent from relatives living abroad, money that is not always reliable. The black market has flourished as humans secretly alternate goods to skip strict authorities' rules. Every day, ordinary Cubans face uncertainty, and the distance between the guarantees of the beyond and these days' truth continues growing wider. Agriculture was once the backbone of Cuba's economy, but it is now in ruins. Cuba used to be a major sugar exporter, but poor management, outdated equipment, and a lack of investment have led to a drastic decline. Sugar production has fallen from more than 8 million tons in the 1980s to under 1 million tons today. Farmers are forced to sell their crops at very low prices set by the government, leaving them with little incentive to work hard or innovate. This has caused severe food shortages, and Cuba now imports over 70% of its food, even though the country has plenty of fertile land. The collapse in agriculture is not just an economic failure. It is a humanitarian crisis that leaves millions without enough to eat. Cuba was once praised around the world for its healthcare system, but that praise is fading fast. Hospitals now face serious shortages of medicines, equipment, and even basic supplies. Many doctors and nurses have left Cuba in search of better jobs, which has left the country with too few healthcare professionals. Often, patients must buy their supplies like bandages and syringes because hospitals simply do not have enough. Education in Cuba remains free, but it is suffering too. Schools are short on textbooks, computers, and other materials. Teachers are paid very little and must often work extra jobs. Although Cuba still has high literacy rates, the overall quality of education has dropped, leaving young Cubans unprepared for the modern world. The future of Cuba is very uncertain. Without major changes in how the country is run, Cuba is likely to remain stuck in poverty for many years to come. The people are tired of empty promises and demand real change, but the government is not willing to give up its tight control. Experts warn that if nothing is done soon, Cuba could face complete economic collapse within the next decade, leading to widespread protests and possibly even a change in government. Some hope remains if Cuba can form better trade ties and allow more private businesses to grow. However, this turnaround would require a whole shift in authority rules, together with help from international companions like Russia and China. Without these modifications, the cycle of poverty and hardships will in all likelihood continue. Here are more eye-opening facts about Cuba's crisis. A recent survey found that nearly 60% of Cuban households now eat only one meal a day because of food shortages. In some cities, water is so scarce that residents are forced to use unsafe sources, leading to outbreaks of waterborne diseases. Nearly 45% of hospitals don't have the basic supplies they need, and many operate with very old equipment. International reports indicate that up to 80% of government contracts in Cuba are awarded without competitive bidding, which wastes resources and fuels corruption. Over the past 5 years, more than 20,000 skilled workers, including engineers, doctors, and teachers, have left Cuba. In some areas, youth unemployment now exceeds 50%, leaving many young Cubans with little hope for the future. These figures show that Cuba's crisis is not just about failing numbers. It is a deep human tragedy affecting every part of society. Cuba's economic crisis is not just a collection of bad numbers, it is a human tragedy unfolding every day. Behind each excessive inflation charge, every record of growing unemployment, and each meal shortage, there's a family suffering to live to tell the tale, a child going to bed hungry, and a dream fading away. The gap between the revolutionary promises of the beyond and the tough fact of existence nowadays grows wider with every passing day, leaving hundreds of thousands to suffer in silence. Every day, the pain of ordinary Cubans deepens, and the world watches, waiting for a change that seems both inevitable and painfully slow. Will Cuba's leaders finally face the truth and make the deep changes needed, or will they continue to cling to a broken system that brings only more hardship? The answer is uncertain, but one fact remains. Whether the government likes it or not, change is coming. The future of Cuba depends on whether the people can come together and demand a new way of life, or if outside forces will step in to reshape the country's fate. As we witness this unfolding crisis, we must ask ourselves, do we stand by and watch a nation suffer, or do we join together to push for real change and help bring hope back to Cuba? The time for empty promises is over. The Cuban people deserve a future where they can live with dignity, good health, and real opportunities for education and work. Let us know in the comments. Do you believe Cuba can turn things around, or is the country doomed to continue in crisis? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth looks at global, economic, and political issues. See you in the next video.